Good afternoon to everyone and a hearty welcome to all our crypto friends. I'm Rekha Khan, your webinar host, and I'd like to extend a warm greeting to all of you. Additionally, today we have Mr. Manan Vora, who will be joining us for today's webinar. The topic for today's discussion is going to be what's new for crypto. We're going to be discussing about compliance and privacy. On joining, you would have noticed that you all are in mute. Please post any questions you have in the chat box during the webinar. Once the webinar will be concluded, we will have a Q&A session where all the participants' questions will be answered by the presenter of today. Now let's understand a little bit about 3.0 verse. From the creator of Odin, MCX and IEX, here is yet another credible and exchange-neutral platform a user can rely on while walking towards the path of crypto and blockchain understanding. Starting from education to knowledge to all the news covered under one super app 3.0 verse, CryptoWire has now been rebranded as 3.0 Wire. From a novice to a professional trader, every market participant can have a slice of information readily available on the touch of their fingers. Let me first walk you through the 3.0 University, 3.0 TV and 3.0 Wire services. We are all aware that crypto and blockchain ecosystem is expanding rapidly, making it tough to keep up with all the events, pricing, and news. However, what if we have a companion app like our buddy that walks beside us, thinks like us, and responds to our expectations? Yes, our own 3.0 verse. Let me start with a brief introduction on the app. Here is a global crypto super app. Let's start with the homepage of the app, which covers all the three pillars: 3.0 University, 3.0 TV, and 3.0 Wire. Under the Wire services, we have rolled out India's first global index of cryptos, IC15. It tracks the performance of the top 15 cryptocurrencies based on market capitalization. Crypto enthusiasts and crypto traders can take informed decisions based on IC15. WireWatch. In this section, we can monitor the best exchange to buy and the best exchange to sell a particular cryptocurrency. In the center of the screen, you would see the arbitrage opportunity available between two exchanges for the same cryptocurrency. We have more than 400 plus cryptocurrencies listed on our platform, along with 70 plus crypto exchanges worldwide. Coming to 3.0 TV, it's an exclusive 24/7 mobile IPTV covering everything on crypto and blockchain ecosystem. It is currently available in 4 different languages: English, Hindi, Gujarati, and Marathi. Coming to 3.0 University, being the world's first digital university to offer courses on crypto and blockchain, you can find the best courses available at a single click of the app. We have also recently launched our multi-market trade routing platform, which is a pro version, which is available in the pro version of our app. So do log into our app and go through the same. With this, I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Manan Vora. Mr. Manan Vora is the SVP of Operations and Strategy for Liminal. He previously worked for ZPay, helping the founders with audit and proof of reserve processes. His vast background in digital asset led him to design wallet architecture and optimal fund flow for various crypto native companies with a focus on CCSS compliance. Manan has over 10 years of professional experience in processing and risk management, working with companies like PwC, Genpact, and Silicon Valley tech startups like Vivong. Join me in welcoming Manan for today's webinar. Hi, Manan.
Hi, Rekha. Thanks a lot for the warm introduction.
You're welcome, sir. Today, unlike our regular sessions, we would not be having a detailed presentation. In fact, we're going to be having a healthy discussion. on the compliance and privacy in crypto. So to start with, I have a very interesting question that I would like to ask Manan and get his views on the same. So Manan, the first question for you is, what are the 4 main threats in managing private key of my wallet?
That's a very, very good question. I think very prominent to actually start with this, right? So I want to take, this question, I want to take a step back. And before I directly jump onto the main threats, one common thing that I've seen is people make a mistake in terms of understanding private key and wallets, right? So
Right.
Wallet is nothing but a combination of your private key and your public key. And now when we are talking about threats to your private key, we will also be distinguishing between whether this private key is being managed by you, which is basically as an individual. So which means is it self-custody, or whether you have opened an account with a centralized custodian like an exchange, and in which case your private keys are not with you and are being instead managed by the exchanges. So there are certain nuances to the threats that you have in these cases, and we can take it like one by one. Right. So what simply happens when you do a crypto transaction is, say, if I'm sending 1 Bitcoin from my private wallet using my private key to, say, your wallet, Rekha, what happens is I send it to your public address that you've given to me, which you have derived using your private key. Now what happens is this Bitcoin basically gets logged into your public address. Now, whoever controls the private key corresponding to this address or the public key can unlock these funds and then send it or transfer it to wherever they want. So which is why fundamentally private key, you can think of it like a password to your net banking app, right? And which is why it is very, very important that you manage your private key very well. Now, let's first talk about threats to private key if you're managing it yourself, right? So the first and foremost important factor when you're starting to manage your private key, and that is where the threat also comes from, is how you're generating your private key. There are various ways to do it. Private key is nothing but a string of random ones and zeros that is derived, and then mathematically you can use that to basically derive your public key and your addresses. So now it can be as basic as you can actually derive a private key using a dice also. You can keep rolling the die 256 times, and wherever it comes 1, you put 1, it comes 0, you put 0, right? Now, 2 important elements of while you generate private key are randomness and confidentiality. So your private key should be generated in a way that it is random, right? If it should not be guessable. So that's number one. And second is you need to do it in a very confidential manner. So the first threat is that you end up generating your private key in the wrong way. Maybe say you have a bunch of friends that are sitting next to you and you're in a party or you're in office and you want to generate your private key, and there are people around you who are shoulder surfing and have not realized and have noted your private key or your seed phrase. Second is maybe you used a malicious wallet software to generate your private key. So that's the very, very first core thing, is that you want to make sure that you're generating your private key using trusted wallet providers. And then again, there are 2 parts there. One is like where you can have a browser based wallet or a private key, something like say MetaMask or Trust Wallet or something like that. And the second is you can use like a hardware device like a Trezor or a Ledger to generate it. So the online one, of course, will have more threats, and we'll talk about that, but that's basically the core. So when you're using your own private key, you generate it using the right software, you do it alone, and you do it in a way that the private key is generated randomly. Now that you have your private key generated, right, the second main threat in managing your own private key is basically your security risks. And now these are common whether you're managing your own private key or you have an account in an exchange and you have your Bitcoin stored there. What happens is it's basically your security risks, right? Like first is as basic as phishing. So you either get an email, purports that it is coming from some legitimate source. It has a link to it. You click on it. It asks you to connect your wallet or your private key, or it asks you to write down the seed phrase or the backup phrase, and you give it to them, and you've exposed your private key. And as soon as you expose your private key, you can be very sure that your funds are basically in threat. Second is like, a security risk that you generally common see is social engineering, where people get in touch with you, they try to befriend you, they try to impersonate someone, and in that conversation you end up giving up your private key to somewhere. There could be a software that you've downloaded, and basically it has malware in it, and you click it and you use it and your private key gets exposed. Or maybe you went to a decentralized application which was not very secure, you connected your wallet, and it as a result took all of your funds. Maybe you selected the wrong wallet provider. We saw something like this happen with Solana, where there was a wallet provider who was storing your private keys in a text format, and some hacker was able to get access to that file and was able to really use those private keys and drain away the wallets. So basically, when you're managing your private key, there are these security risks that you have to be always focused on, and happy to talk more about these risks. Third is that you do not back up your private key at all, or you don't back it up in the right way. And now what happens is, say if you're managing your own keys and if you do not have a backup, and if something happens to the wallet that you were using, and maybe it's a hardware device like a Trezor or Ledger, and it has resetted or rebooted, it will ask you to put the seed phrase, which can be a 12 or a 24 word, which is basically representing your private key in a very easy to understand way, so that you can back it up properly. Now, if you do not have a backup to it, you lose access to your funds forever. So this is one of the main threats that I've seen when people are using their private keys. They do not back it up correctly. And if something happens to it, and say you bought a new computer, your computer got stolen, and now you're trying to recover your MetaMask wallet and you don't have your backup phrase. So hence you don't have access to your private key, and hence you do not have access to your funds. And the fourth, I would say, from a threat perspective, which a lot of people don't focus on, is when you're managing your private keys, you do not end up managing your inheritance or succession really well. So, and this is again true even if you're managing it yourself, or if you have an account with an exchange or something, but becomes very critical when you're managing your own keys, right? So what I don't remember the figures exactly, but more than $4 billion till date have been lost because crypto native people who got into the industry pretty early and hold a lot of amount of Bitcoin, they did not inform their family members or close friends, or they did not probably understand it correctly, and they were not able to, after they died, their family members, the close ones, were not able to understand. Because crypto, what people don't realize is that if you've invested in crypto and you're managing your private keys, which means you are way ahead of the curve. But that's not necessarily true for your family members. They might not understand a thing about crypto. And if you've not laid down a clear process of how to access your wallet and your private key in your absence, those funds are going to be lost forever. So even though you invested in Bitcoin in like 2011 or 12 and you were a visionary, that wealth will be of no use, because now it will be lost in blockchain forever. So in short, how you're generating your keys, how the security risks that you're seeing, and how you're protecting yourself and your keys against that, whether you're backing up your key and backing it up in the right way and storing it in like a bank locker and making sure it's environment proof and all of that, and planning your succession and inheritance. These are like largely 4 risks that I see when people manage their private keys and wallets.
Thank you. Now, since we've already spoken about the threats, now let's come to our compliance. What is the compliance associated with cryptocurrency and cross-border transactions?
Absolutely. So when you think of compliances, right, again, you'll have to break it down into 2 parts. First is whether you're an individual or whether you're like an organization, like a company, etc. There will be certain nuances to compliances when it comes to that. And second is you'll have to break it down from a country perspective, because compliances will change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. However, there are certain compliances that are pretty standard across the globe. And as we speak, crypto is a space where regulations haven't completely been framed. Regulators are still understanding and trying to understand the nature of blockchain and come up with compliances. For example, like let's pick, say, India, right? So if you're here, one of the basic, irrespective of whether you're an individual or a corporate, one of the biggest compliance right now that you need to make sure that you're adhering to is the taxation legislature. So there are clear-cut tax rules that have come up by the government of India, and it is your duty to make sure that you're complying with that regulation and reporting your taxes in a very clear and correct manner. There are certain gray areas still in the sense that how and where FEMA gets introduced here. If you're transferring your wallet or funds from, say, your exchange account in maybe ZepPay to your Binance account, are you transferring funds out of India? So those are, you will, as a user, you'll have to take those discretion and make sure that whenever you're doing a transaction, you're ensuring that local regulations you are complying with in a very transparent manner. And wherever you think there is a gray area or something is not clear, the best choice of action is to not perform that action if you're not comfortable with that. Now, coming to like global compliances, right? So apart from taxation and these cross country regulations like FEMA, one common thing which is a concern for regulators, and hence there is a lot of compliance around it, is anti-money laundering and counter financing of terrorism, right? So what we generally known as the AML-CFT. Now, if you're an individual, the best thing that you can do is to make sure that you're using a wallet provider that is compliant with these procedures. And second is that you're clearly identifying the person that you're sending funds to, and you're not dealing with random third people that you've met on the internet, right? Now, if you're a corporate, of course, your responsibilities go much more than that. And I might not touch a lot into the corporate side of it, but basically you need to make sure that your company has clear AML-CFT policies and procedures in place. Everything is clearly laid down. You're identifying your customers in the right way. You're making sure that you're monitoring their transaction. And as soon as you see anything suspicious, you go ahead and report a suspicious activity report with the relevant authorities, on and so forth. So AML-CFT is like another major compliance that generally comes into the picture. While it is claimed that crypto, is used for illicit activities, it is not that, illicit activities did not happen before, but since the nature of the technology is new, it is true that a lot of bad actors also try and use crypto, and hence it's important that we as users do our role to make sure that we are not directly, indirectly, knowingly, unknowingly supporting any bad actors in money laundering or financing of terrorism. And another compliance that is coming up now and is becoming more and more common is the travel rule. So basically, travel rule requires that any transaction above a certain dollar threshold or a certain INR amount, you need to be able to identify the beneficiary. So if you are using an exchange, then the exchange will be responsible that if Manan wants to send something to Rekha and it's above a certain threshold, then I need to ensure and KYC and understand that these funds are going to Rekha's address. You can think of it as, eventually a central database being created of addresses and accounts. And when you're transferring funds above a threshold from one person to another, you are sort of doing it. As an individual, like I said, irrespective of the dollar threshold, it is your responsibility to ensure that you're complying and sending funds only to people you know and not to any random people. If you're a corporate, right now it is not mandatory but recommendatory that you implement travel rule. But as soon as it sort of becomes mandatory, you'll have to make sure that you're integrated with a provider that supports travel rule, and any transfers that are happening above a threshold are being identified as to where they're going. So yeah, those are broadly the compliances that come to my mind when you are dealing with crypto. Make sure you pay your taxes correctly. Make sure you identify people who you're dealing with. Make sure you're complying with your local cross-border transaction legislations like FEMA, and make sure that you're not supporting anyone willingly or unwillingly or knowingly, unknowingly in performing money laundering or financing terrorism.
Absolutely. We all want to be promoting more of, compliance is, I feel it's the utmost important thing. And as an individual, I think it's very important that we follow that and, be as transparent as possible. So as you rightly said, it's really important that we follow all the compliance, because in future, otherwise you're going to be having a lot of issues. So let's be more clear with the government rather than trying to hide our transactions or hide and do work. Absolutely agree to it. So going a step further, will the implementation of KYC derail the beauty of crypto and blockchain? I think it's a boon.
And that's an interesting question. Uh, well, see, basically, when you say derail the beauty of crypto and blockchain, right? What we need to really understand is what do you mean by or how do you view crypto and blockchain, right? Yes, privacy is one of the tenets of how crypto started and whatever, but there are various other benefits and various other tenets on which crypto and blockchain are sort of building. For example, decentralization, for example, being able to control your own funds, right? So when you look at KYC, it is not affecting or altering the beauty of crypto and blockchain, like the core beauty of crypto and blockchain, including your distributed ledger technology, including the fact that KYC does nothing to decentralization, right? As long as there are individual nodes who are supporting the blockchain and maintaining a database of transactions, you can have a clear, open, distributed ledger and no one can question that. KYC does nothing to permissionlessness. So basically what happens right now, one thing that crypto blockchain industry is trying to fight is that you need a permission for everything. So if you want to open a bank account, you need a permission. So even if you do like bring this into the picture, you can still go ahead and create a wallet of your own and control your own funds. There are so many people who are unbanked in the world, but there is internet connection available to them. So that does nothing to the beauty of crypto and blockchain for them and their ability to do commerce. KYC does nothing to composability. Everything in blockchain is still going to be open source. As a Web 2 person, when you talk to someone in Web 2 and tell them that, my source code is on GitHub and it's completely open source, they're not able to believe it, because that, the fundamental idea of Web 2 was protecting your IP and protecting your code and, make money out of that. The beauty of crypto and blockchain is that everything remains open source. And as a result of which, if I want to build something on top of your application, I can just see your code, build something on top of it and create completely something new, right? For example, Uber uses and pays thousands and millions of dollars, not thousands, millions of dollars to Google for using their Google Map API so that they can integrate that with Uber. Imagine if Google Maps was something that was created on Web3 and the source codes are open, people could create Ubers without having the need to even reach out to Google, right? So my point is, when you look at like beauty of crypto and blockchain, you cannot narrow it down only to one aspect of privacy. So I don't think KYC will really derail the beauty of crypto and blockchain in general. Yes, there is a certain faction of the users who would not really be comfortable or would not want to identify themselves, but there are always trade-offs that you need to do for the larger benefit of the entire ecosystem and benefit. So I mean, and when we say KYC, right, like even with KYC, what happens is when we talk about it, our mind really takes us to like a centralized provider who will have all of these information, but that's not completely true. There are a lot of DeFi protocols that are coming in now who are able to, who are coming up with solutions where you can KYC yourself without, there are zero knowledge proofs coming in wherein you can prove who you are without actually disclosing your documents or whatever. So there is there was a ETH India happening in Bangalore recently, and there was a hackathon, and one of the projects was where they were preparing a zero knowledge proof where instead of giving your mobile number and getting the OTP, you can still identify yourself and complete the transaction without giving up your mobile number. So the it's the start of it. So there are people working on even making KYC very decentralized to the extent that with zero knowledge, you probably don't need to like submit your documents to identify your nationality or your age, etc. But these are just starting days. I'm sure, there is going to be a lot of time that we'll have to give for these to evolve. But yeah, I mean, long story short, I don't think KYC will derail beauty of crypto blockchain. You need to really look at the broader benefits that crypto and blockchain have to offer.
Sure. So it is important that we do a KYC for us also. I mean, in general, I'm saying if you don't do it again, there's going to be a lot of security issues. There's going to be a lot of, so it's going to be an individual thing, you know. I mean, I feel that KYC is something which is really good that has come up, and this helps us also in a great way. Going on to the practices, what are the best practices to keep the transaction private and yet compliant?
So again, right? So when you're making a blockchain transaction, at least on the blockchain, when you go, it is always going to be addresses. You can't see like names, etc. So from that perspective, transactions will always be private. Now, there is always going to be some level of trade-off that you have to do if you want to maintain like privacy and compliance, but with the right techniques you can have a fine balance between both, right? Now, first thing you have to understand is that if you want privacy, then having an account on a centralized exchange or centralized custodian is completely out of the picture, because in that case you cannot have any privacy as such, in the sense that you will be identified by your exchange provider, you will be making a transaction through that. So there is always going to be someone who can eventually identify you, and this was the person who made the transaction. So if you want to keep your transaction private, and we'll come to the compliance part later, with the intention that you want privacy, but you don't want to do anything against the law and still be compliant. If you want to do that, the first thing you'll have to do is you'll have to move to self-custody, which means you will have to take ownership of your own private key and use a non-custodial or a self-custody wallet, like something like, say, MetaMask, which is decentralized, and you open an account and control your keys. Now, like I said, if you're an individual, you have adopted self-custody, you can sort of have your transactions private, because now you're using your own key and a hardware device or like an online key, and you're making the transaction. Having said that, from a compliance perspective, if your intention is that you want to be private yet compliant, then you need to still do the other things that we spoke about earlier, that you still need to make sure that you are filing your taxes, even though your transactions are private. You have to make sure that you're not dealing with any third parties that you are not aware of. You have to make sure that if you have dealt with someone and if some information comes to your notice, you proactively inform the corresponding authorities that this was something that happened. There are other legitimate ways also, right? So for example, you should not reuse addresses. So say if I wanted to do trade with you, Rekha, and I gave you an address. Now you know that this address belongs to me. So you can, and say if I continue using this address with other parties, you can still go to blockchain and see, what are the other transactions that Manan has done, because now this address belongs to me. So one good practice of remaining private yet has nothing to do with compliance is that you don't reuse addresses. You generate like new address every time you want to do a new transaction, so that once you reveal your address to one person, they are not able to see other addresses that belong to you, and hence other transactions that you're doing. So there are ways, like I said, you can come up with to make sure that there is a good balance between privacy and compliance, but there is always going to be trade-off. And whenever that trade-off happens, you have to ensure that compliance will triumph privacy. You cannot go against the law of the land and do something just to remain anonymous. But yes, you can still choose to embrace privacy and make sure that you're self-compliant by making sure you're doing the things that I mentioned.
Sure. Thank you. Going on, let's talk about cybersecurity. What are the challenges that you feel are there in the cybersecurity?
So cybersecurity is like the biggest challenge that users, companies, that they face when it comes to like securing their applications, securing their funds, etc. Right? I think if we talk only about crypto, I think more than $1 billion probably has already been lost in 2022 alone, including 2 or 3 bridge hacks that happened, 2 or 3 wallet attacks that happened, like to talk about Solana, etc., etc. Now, the biggest challenge is with cybersecurity is that it is closely linked with technology, and technology is evolving every second as we speak. Now, if I am a hacker, and if I am a very sophisticated hacker, I will be able to come up with very sophisticated means to, perform hacks. And if you are not well educated, if you're not trained, and if you're not aware of these mechanisms that hackers are using, you will fall susceptible to some of these. There are some ones which are very common, and a lot of it has been spoken about it. A lot of education has been given about it. Something as basic as, if you receive like a call and you don't identify, don't give your OTP, etc., etc. But because hackers are also people who are very good at technology, they are evolving, they are coming up with new ways. And that is always like the biggest challenge of how do you catch up with this. And generally what happens is, you come up with a solution only after, like, maybe, a lot of victims have fallen prey to the new cybersecurity hack. And there are sometimes things that you probably like, with crypto and blockchain, there are a lot of new sophisticated ways that have come in. There are flash loan attacks, but there is a hack happening in the same transaction in the same block and drain the wallets. There are bridge attacks that are happening where you're bridging assets from Ether to, say, another chain. You don't even realize you're giving up control of your funds, and someone hacked the bridge, and you lost all of your funds there. So I would say the biggest challenge is staying up to date with the new mechanisms and new means that the hackers are deploying. Getting lack of education is like another big challenge with cybersecurity. Having said all of the sophisticated things aside, people still fall prey to like basic issues. You see an email, you don't realize, you click it, there's a website impersonating the main website. Where as simple as you search like something like Binance or some big name, and there will be a Google promoted ad on the top of it, and it will be a URL of some hacker, and you think you're clicking on the legitimate Binance website, you connect your wallet or you log in, and you end up giving your credentials. Another thing is like, especially in the crypto world, is that if, say, you're using something like MetaMask or Trust Wallet or a browser-based wallet, and you saw a decentralized application and you thought it was cool, you went there, you connected it, maybe it was legitimate, you did one transaction and done. But what happens is, you don't realize you've already given a lot of access to that dApp. And now if you're not going to use it, you should ideally go back to your setting and disconnect yourself or your wallet from that dApp, so that if there is some vulnerability at the dApp level, you don't end up losing funds to your wallet. And again, this is an example of how technology is evolving, how it is becoming more and more difficult for people to combat cybersecurity, and how hackers are taking advantage of these new and sophisticated means.
Sure, cyber security is a very challenging thing. Every day you learn new things in that. So now, if you had to point out 5 things which any user should keep in mind to prevent the cyber attacks, so what are the 5 most important things that you feel as a user I should always be cautious about? So if you can kind of give us tips.
Absolutely. And what I'll do is I'll focus this answer from a Web3 crypto perspective. So if that's the perspective, the first thing that you need to make sure is that you never reveal or give up your private key or your seed phrase or your credentials. So like RBI keeps saying, never share your OTP with anyone. It's the same logic. So the number one thing that you need to do if you want to prevent cyber attacks is that no matter what, you never ever give your private key or seed phrase or your login credentials to anyone, even if it's someone that you know. It is an absolute, I mean, if you do this, honestly, Rekha, 90% of your cyber attacks, you are sorted out. So that's probably number one. Second thing that you need to do is that you need to do your due diligence on any website, any third-party application that you're dealing with. Say you came up with something very fancy on Google or Twitter, you liked it, you clicked their link. Before you connect your wallet, you need to do a lot of research around this to make sure that the link is valid, the company is valid, you're connecting it for a very valid reason. Without doing due diligence, a lot of the times when you, in hindsight, try seeing what happened, the issue was obvious. There was a spelling mistake in the URL. It was not HTTPS secured, or it was coming from any legitimate source, but you just didn't do your due diligence on that, and you went ahead, you connected it. So ask yourself this question every time you're trying to like go to a new website that you've not dealt with before. Is the URL correct? Are the people correct? Is the website correct? Have they been in business? What's their Twitter followers like? Have they been active? What their Telegram followers are like? And once you're convinced, speak to a few people that you know in the industry. Have they heard of these guys? Only and only after you've done your due diligence, go ahead and connect your wallet or share any information there. Third is in it's true in crypto for sure. I don't know how common it is in other industry, but there are a lot of unsolicited DMs and direct messages and offers that come to you, right? Often more, offering crazy returns. And in crypto, it is, people are gullible and they believe because it's crypto, 1,000% returns are, possible in a month, right? So what happens is maybe you're on Telegram, you posted on some channel that, on an official channel of some provider that you're using, and you said this is the challenge that I'm facing. Because there are so many hackers also in that group, some of them will message you privately saying that, okay, I read your this is how I'm representing the official support of this company, so go ahead and click this and solve this. So any unsolicited offer that you have not reached out to someone, if someone's coming to you, always a good habit to just report them, block them, make sure you don't deal with them. Fourth is you need to keep yourself updated, because honestly, these are your funds and you need to be the most aware of it, and you need to do everything that you can do to secure your funds. The best way to do it is following cybersecurity trends. There are a lot of newspapers, there are a lot of newsletters, YouTube channels, there are Twitter accounts who keep sharing tips, who keep sharing the latest cybersecurity trends, what's happening, who make you aware if there is a breach in some application, just go and disconnect your wallet. So just sort of follow those videos, follow those guys, be generally research things, be up to date in terms of what are the latest trends in cybersecurity hacking, to just make yourself aware. And probably the fifth one I would say is very common to like Web 2, Web 3 is use strong login credentials. Use a password manager, generate your passwords in a secure way, have a good combination of small case, big case, special characters. Do not reuse any of your password in any of your accounts. Do not use a password that you can just memorize, because by default, that is an easy password and a dictionary attack can easily, sort of reveal your password. So, and have multi-factor authentication for every account that you use. So something like Google Authenticator or a mobile OTP or a hardware, key like a UB key, but always have a two-factor, so that even if someone knows your login ID and password, they get stuck on the second factor. So if you do these things, if you have a strong login credential and a 2FA, if you're following the right people and updating yourself about and educating yourself about it, if you're not responding to unsolicited offers, if you're not sharing your private key or seed phrase with anyone at all, and if you're doing your due diligence on companies or whatever that you're dealing with, those should be like good 5 ways of how you can prevent and protect yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think it's also important that we are, when we are going through some websites or, we first think, what is it that we're going to be entering? Like, for example, many a times it does happen that you're generally seeing some post or something in the social media, and there is a click button, something pops up and you don't even think and you just click on it. So these are things which I feel, people should be more, when they're going through all these posts or anything, like you said, they have to be more attentive probably and see what you're doing, figure out whether this post is really going to help you, figure that out, and then probably,
And also sometimes what happens is, someone has hacked your friend's account and they're talking.
You do get messages like that.
And they're talking in a way which is, not how they generally talk. That is a big red flag, right? So just being a lot more aware and conscious can go a long way in making sure you're secure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now, since we've already spoken about how can we prevent, what are the 5 points that you feel is very crucial in prevention of cyber attacks, how do you handle these cyber risks from vendor and third parties?
So the first thing is, probably when you're dealing with these vendors and third parties, first is that you communicate via official channels only. So if there is a vendor or a third party that you're dealing with, and if they're randomly sending you a WhatsApp from some number and saying that this needs to be done, that has to be completely avoided, or tell them that fine, send it to me via your official email, and then we'll take it forward. So as simple as like any vendor, any third party that you're dealing with, make sure that they communicate via their official registered ID only, and not via any other unofficial ways. As soon as you do that, you eliminate like at least 30-40% of the cyber risk from these vendors, third parties, right? Second is that you educate and train yourself, others. If you're a company, you educate yourself, your employees, again, in terms of all of the risks that are happening, whatever are the trends that are happening, to just make sure that if a vendor is reaching out to you, or if someone is saying that say my boss has authorized this, and go and do it. If it always a good habit that you go back to your boss and check that is that mail coming from you. Sometimes what happens is your boss's email ID is probably hacked, or a third party has got access to your email database and is sending emails to you, right? So if there is anything that has got to do with funds or access or clicking or link, it's important that you go and double check this with the person directly, especially if this is not something that they usually do. Third is like access management, right? So whatever vendor or third party that you're using, make sure that you do proper access management from their side, right? So if you're a corporate, you just make sure that if a vendor is assisting you with something, they have access only to things that are required, and not shared like share like the entire folder with them. For example, if you just need to share a file, just share the access to that file. If you do access management correctly, this ensures that any third party vendor that is dealing with you, and this can be in individual capacity also. Sometimes we just end up like sharing our entire Google Drive with someone, or sometimes we end up, and that might have some personal files that you've kept and some information that can turn out to be dangerous if someone else has access to it. You could probably end up sharing sensitive information that you've in the first place that you should not have kept. Maybe you kept your seed phrase online and you shared it, right? So do proper access management to make sure these guys, third parties, vendors, have the limited, restricted. For example, you don't need to give like edit access to them, or maybe give a link that probably expires in 30 days. Keep reviewing that whether they still need access or not. And the fourth is like perform like regular security audits, I would say. And this can be done even if you're an individual or a corporation. You can have a security checklist, which you can have either a third party or yourself self audited maybe every 3 months, to just make sure that all of the things that you want to do from a security perspective are being done correctly. So for example, vendors are not having access to whatever. I know, or there is a list or database of official vendors that is maintained, and any employee knows it. So when they're dealing with someone, they know they're dealing with the official vendor or the third party. I have disconnected the accounts after the relationship is over with that vendor or third party. So you can, and this checklist can change case to case based on what you are doing, who you are, but you can probably have that checklist that makes sense for you, and you can periodically review this to make sure that from vendors and third party perspective, you're protected from these cyber risks.
Sure. This is really informative and interesting. The last question that we have for today is, how would KYC help regularizing on-chain transactions?
Interesting, right? So basically when you, and there's a very basic answer, right? So when you're doing like transactions on the blockchain, like I said, when someone goes on the chain, all they are going to see is basically addresses. Now, a normal person who has no access to any information or KYC data, for them, you're still private and you're still the on-chain transactions will keep happening the way they do. No one's going to realize what this belongs to. The place where KYC comes in or kicks in is that first, the KYC information has to absolutely be only with people that are relevant. For example, law enforcement authorities, etc., etc. So from that perspective, also, your privacy does not get like completely out of the this thing to everyone, but it's restricted with the right people. And how this helps in regularizing on-chain transactions, that I'll probably give you a example that actually makes sense rather than describing something abstract, right? So say you were you were a victim of some fraud and someone impersonated you, or your wallet got hacked, or your key got lost, or whatever, and as a result your wallet was drained and you lost your Bitcoin, for example. Now that has now gone, because it is blockchain and on chain, you can track the movement of funds. So you can see that your Bitcoin is moved from one address to another. But now you as an individual can do nothing about it because you don't know who this address belongs to. But if KYC comes in, and with the help of on-chain transactions and the transparency that blockchain provides, the right authorities with the access to data can figure out, who this belongs to. Maybe hacker was, of course, smart enough, and he or she transferred Bitcoin to an address which was not KYC'd, right? But then they say eventually transferred it to someone else, and everything is being recorded. The entire chain is being recorded on blockchain, and it's completely on chain. You somewhere reach a point where it reaches an address that is KYC'd, and then you can reach out to that person, and of course with subpoenaing them and using all of the legal machinery that you have at hand, and then you can actually backtrack that transaction, and you can identify like, okay, who sent you this, and reach to the perpetrator. So the biggest thing that KYC does is, like, with the power of on-chain transactions and transparencies, eventually help to identify the culprits or the perpetrators of fraud. So maybe that example would have sort of helped.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an interesting example. In fact, it was so basic and so layman language that I could actually understand what exactly was the meaning for this complete question. Cool. So with this, I think we have finished the questions for today. Let me just check. Have we gotten any questions from our viewers? So I think I have one question which is coming from Sushil. Sushil would like to know, so you did mention about reading on cybersecurity and understanding. Are there any sites that you recommend which are authenticated or not? So that's the question that Sushil would like to know. Are there any specific sites or portals that you recommend that we should be going through for understanding more on, reading more on the cyber attacks?
So there are actually quite...
Keep yourself updated, I think. Yeah, that's what his question is. Yeah.
Quite a lot of good portals, YouTube videos, Twitter threads or Twitter personalities that are there. But if we speak specifically with respect to, say, crypto, I would recommend there is something known as CCSS, which is Cryptocurrency Security Standards. It's basically a set of standard that is promoted by C4, which is a non-profit organization based out of Canada. They come up with excellent materials in terms of, like, self-help techniques, or how to do self-custody, how to manage your private key, what are the latest trends in cybersecurity, how do you protect yourself from hackers, etc., etc. So do check them out. But I can, of course, go back to my history and library and maybe share like a more compiled list of resources that you can use. There are definitely a couple of newsletters also that I can recommend.
Perfect. So we'll look forward to that information coming in from you so that we can share it with Sushil in future. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Manan, for taking out time and sharing your views on today's topic. I would also like to thank all the wonderful audience who've shown interest in learning and making informed decisions. before entering the crypto market. I welcome all of you all to please download the Crypto 3.0 Verse app. Do go through our new feature, which is multi-market trade routing platform. Thank you so much, Manan. It was a great session. We look forward to more sessions with you.
Thank you, Rekha. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to your audience.
Absolutely. The pleasure is ours, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.